Hi, thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. Today I'm doing a very, very late October wrap up. Obviously it's now sort of the, 16th of November. I've just had so many other things that I've been filming, I just haven't got around to doing my wrap up from October. So I had a really short reading month in October because I read for Victober The Women in White by Wilkie. So I'll talk about this one first. But this is 500 and something pages. Yeah, 500 pages. And the writing is tiny. So it literally took me about 3 weeks to read this. Did I say it's by Wilkie? I'm not sure. But I originally heard of this book because I remember that Simon Savage used to talk about this quite a lot on the Readers podcast. And I found a copy in a charity shop years ago, and it just sort of languished on my shelf because I was put off by the size and the tiny writing. And then I, for Victober, I decided, myself and Joe Smith decided to buddy read this together. So it was really nice to have someone to buddy read it with. It sort of spares you one. Not that I needed a spare one, but just because of the size of it, like I say, and the amount of time it took me to read it. So basically, this is obviously set in the Victorian era, so it's for Victober. And it follows, so it's a mystery story and it's really gripping, and it's told by, so at the beginning you have the first page, sort of the introduction says that this is a tale about the endurance of how much a woman can bear, and it's told by Walter Hartwright. So he is an art teacher and he's the main person who gives an account. He's pulled together all these accounts of what's happened from different people and put them all into one sort of cohesive form, which is the book. So his section is the introduction, quite a lengthy first section of the book, and then it moves on to other people who are sort of part of the story and their account of what happened. So the mystery is, so Walter, at the beginning, Walter is walking through London, as I say, as an art teacher, and he's just been offered a post to go and teach a couple of ladies art in the north of England. And as he's walking home one night, he sees a lady who is the woman in white, dressed all in white, and he has this strange conversation with her, and it turns out that she knows of the house where he's going to teach these young women about drawing. And then after she's fled from him, not from him, but after she's fled, he finds out that she'd escaped from an asylum. So he's sort of determined to find out more and what is the link between her and this family that he's joining. So he goes up to the house in the north of England, and he is with Miss Howcombe and Miss Fairley, who are sisters, but with a different... No, is it a different mother or a different father? I think it's different fathers. And they're basically living in this massive manor house with this rich eccentric uncle who's complete complete wet blanket basically. And then it basically goes from there into how the women in white has relevance to this family. And also Laura is engaged to marry this man called Sir Percival Glyde, who she doesn't want to marry, and she's falling in love with Walter, the art teacher. And so I won't tell you if she does marry him or not, but that is a very big part of the story. And another big part of the story is there is a man who is Percival Glyde's best friend called Count Fosco, and he's married to Laura's aunt. And so they are very, very devious, and they are sort of really very selfish, very out for their own gains, and they are kind of trying to suck everyone in and charm them in their story. So then, like I say, I can't really say any more than that without it making sort of spoilers of what happens. But the way how it's written in different narratives is good. The characters are larger than life. Like, you can picture each character, especially Count Fosco. He's just this, he's a very big Italian man, and he's very loud and very eccentric in his dress, and he carries around some little animals with him all the time who he treats like his children, and it's very larger than life. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. There were a few points in it where the pace sort of slowed down a bit. I thought the writing was very good. The Victorian atmosphere and the kind of gothicness and sensationalism of it came through very well. So I definitely recommend it. I would read more Wilkie Collins, but I would need a break in between because I don't like reading things that are very similar in style and one after the other. So that was the only thing I read for Victober because that took me most of the month, and once I've read one Victorian book I don't really want to go straight into another Victorian book, so that was my contribution for Victober. The book that I read before it, I feel like I'm going to do it a bit of a disservice because I read it 6 weeks ago now and it's really hard for me to remember everything that I wanted to say, and that is a book I've had for a long time. So The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Campbell, which is a book of short stories. Jen is a YouTuber who I'm sure everyone is familiar with. He has a great YouTube channel, and this is her, as I just said, collection of short stories. So I found with these stories, they are very sort of mythical and otherworldly and strange, and they're very, very easy to read, but I know that I'd benefit from reading them again because I think the first time you get caught up in the story, and if you read it then again the second time, you would appreciate them on a deeper level, like the deeper underlying meaning and the sort of what's the word, the sort of message they're trying to get across, but without explicitly saying the message, if you know what I mean. So they're very cleverly written, and my favourite story of the book was the title story, which is about a couple who are lying in bed at night and having a conversation about the beginning of the world, which I really, really enjoyed that one. Some are quite short, some are longer, but if I just read out the back, it kind of tells you the sorts of stories. So stories of family and magic, lost souls and superstitions, spirits and jam jars, mini apocalypses, animal hearts and sideshows, mermaids on display at the local aquarium, a girl running a coffin hotel on a remote island, a couple rewriting the history of the world in the middle of the night. So yeah, that kind of, I feel really bad that I didn't review this earlier because I could have talked about many more of the stories, but they've just sort of I just can't remember the details now because it's been such a while since I read it, but I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 stars, and I'd be interested to read other stuff Jen reads. I must get her children's books to read with my children, so I still haven't read Franklin and Luna books yet, but I definitely read more of her work. And like I said, I think there's a lot of depth to the stories that need to be read more than once to sort of fully delve into, or read very closely to get the full maximum out of them. And then the only other book I read, which I didn't really read because I DNF'd it, so I got about 100 pages through, maybe 150. It was this book, One for My Baby by Tony Parsons. So he was an author that I wanted to try, and I picked this up in a charity shop many moons ago. And actually, I know why I read this month. It was because I was looking back at my reading goals, and one of my reading goals was to clear some more of my 2011 TBR. And this was on that list. So I picked it up because I was looking for something quite light after I'd read the Women in White. I didn't want something too heavy going. And this is about a man called Alfie who has been to China, and whilst he's in China he met a woman who was the love of his life, who was called, can't even remember what she's called. Never mind. Can't remember. Anyway, so he met this lady who he falls in love with and marries, and we know that they're not together anymore. And then we find out a little way into the book that she's died, and they went diving, and she died in a diving accident. And he has come back to England, and he's sort of very much missing China, and he's kind of trying to reconnect with his family. And he also meets a Chinese family in England who he's sort of coming into contact with. He's teaching English to international students at sort of a night school. But so that if I heard someone say that, I think, well, that sounds good, but I didn't like it. I found it actually quite offensive in places, because when was it written? not this is an excuse, but it was written in 2001, and the way it talks about Chinese people I actually found quite offensive a few times, like the way that it mimics the dialect and their accents in the book, the way that he can't understand what they're saying, and I'm like, well, I can understand what you're trying to make them sound like they're saying. And I don't know, he just I found they were quite stereotypical in some ways, and I just didn't, that really put me off. And there's also some characters in here which are sort of sexist. Some of the male teachers are really sexist. There's one who just makes Essex girl jokes all the time, and it didn't fit. I just felt like it was unnecessary, and it wasn't actually achieving anything in the story. It was just adding in like sexist jokes and misogynist material for no purpose as far as I could gather. And I just thought, do you know what, I've got loads of other books I'd rather be reading. I'm DNFing, and I'm really, really bad at DNFing books. Like, I hardly ever DNF books, and then I get really frustrated and they don't get any better. And my husband's always saying to me, just stop reading it, you don't like it, just stop reading it. But I definitely did DNF this one. I'm going to be giving it back to a charity shop, and I give that like 2 stars max. So that's all I read in the month of October, because like I said, The Women in White took me such a long time. So if you can remember, let me know what you read in October and what was the best thing that you read. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what you read in the month of and what you read for Victober if you joined in. If you've got a Victober video, then link the video for me and so I can watch it. And I will be back soon with my hauls from my birthday and from November. See you soon. Bye.